You staged it! You child abuser! You child abuser! Where's Jimmy Savile? Where's Jimmy Savile? Get back! Traitor! You child abuser!
Keir Starmer stepped onto the stage expecting applause. Instead, he was met with something no politician ever wants: boos, anger, and a crowd that had completely turned against him. This wasn't just a handful of hecklers. It was loud, unfiltered frustration. At first, he tried to push forward, acting as though nothing was wrong. But the noise only intensified. Faces in the crowd shifted from neutral to openly furious. Some shook their heads in disappointment, while others shouted over him. Any hope of a warm reception quickly disappeared. This wasn't just pushback. It was a public humiliation. What went so wrong? Why did his own supporters turn on him so brutally? Let's break it down. As leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer likely expected he was walking into friendly territory, an audience ready to at least hear him out, maybe even applaud. But the moment he entered, something fell off. There were no smiles, no energy, just folded arms, skeptical looks, and low murmurs. Even before he had the chance to speak, it was obvious this was not the welcome he had been hoping for.
Every stage during this crisis, my approach has been driven by the need to respond to both these tragedies, to stand by the right to self-defence of any nation which suffers terrorism on this scale, alongside the basic human rights of innocent Palestinians caught once again in the crossfire.
As he began his speech, he touched on the economy, repeating familiar lines about fiscal responsibility and Labour's plan for growth. But instead of nods of approval, he was met with blank stares. Undeterred, he moved on to Brexit, attempting the near impossible balancing act of appeasing both pro-Brexit and pro-Remain voters. It didn't work. Whispers spread through the crowd. Eyes rolled. Someone in the back muttered under their breath. Then came the real breaking point: his stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict. He argued against a ceasefire, insisting it wasn't the right move. And that's when it happened. The first boo rang out, loud and sharp, cutting through the air. Starmer hesitated, visibly thrown. But before he could recover, another voice joined in. Then another. Suddenly, it wasn't just a handful of dissenters. It was a full wave of discontent. He had lost them. The room wasn't just skeptical. It was actively turning against him. From that moment, things began to spiral. The tension in the air was palpable, shifting quickly from uneasy silence to something far worse. At first, there were only a few whispers and uncomfortable glances. But after the first boo, everything changed. The murmurs grew louder, turning into open grumbling. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. Others leaned toward each other, exchanging frustrated whispers. The frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface had finally boiled over. Starmer tried to push forward, acting as though he hadn't noticed the shift. He raised his voice, trying to sound confident, but it was no use. The more he spoke, the louder the crowd became. Some shouted questions at him, demanding answers. A woman near the front stood up and yelled, "What about the children's care?" Others quickly joined in, echoing her frustration. He hesitated, a brief flicker of uncertainty before trying to regain control, but by then it was already too late.
True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house. We demand a people's house. We are in crisis. We are in crisis. Our whole future is in jeopardy.
The Labour MPs sitting behind Starmer looked visibly uneasy. One buried his face in a notepad, pretending to write, while another clutched her phone as if the screen might offer an escape from the growing disaster unfolding in front of them. Even Starmer's closest allies seemed desperate to fade into the background. Then came the final blow. People began to leave. Rows of attendees stood up and walked out. Some muttered under their breath as they exited, while others made sure to boo one last time. It was obvious Starmer had completely lost the room, and there was no coming back from it. This wasn't just a bad speech. It was the latest in a series of political missteps that have left Keir Starmer's leadership hanging by a thread. Labour supporters, restless for months, now felt their worst fears confirmed. Starmer appears out of touch with the very people he is meant to lead. His stance on Brexit has been particularly damaging. In 2016, he was a strong Remain supporter, pushing for a second referendum. Now he is urging everyone to move on, seemingly hoping voters will forget. But no one is forgetting. Pro-Brexit Labour voters feel abandoned, while pro-Remain supporters feel betrayed. He has managed to alienate both sides.
If he thinks that bothers me, he doesn't know me. Protest or power. That's why we changed our party conference. That's why we changed our party. Thank you.
Keir Starmer's economic policy is filled with promises about stability and fiscal responsibility, sounding like talking points. And when it comes to foreign policy, his refusal to support a Gaza ceasefire has fueled anger inside his own party. Longtime Labour Party supporters, who once viewed the party as a champion of justice, now feel they have a leader playing it safe instead of standing up for what is right. Behind the scenes, Labour insiders are growing nervous. There are whispers of leadership challenges, and some MPs are weighing options. Starmer was supposed to be Labour's steady hand, the figure who could rebuild trust and guide the party back to power. But the polls tell a different story. Labour's approval is slipping, and the Southport disaster only made matters worse. If Starmer doesn't reverse course soon, his time at the top could be nearing an end.
The first is on the question of terrorism and what constitutes terrorism. And my concern in this case is that we have clearly got an example of extreme violence, individualized violence, that we have to protect our children from and our citizens from. And it is a new threat. It's not what we would have usually thought of as terrorism when definitions were drawn up, when guidelines were put in place, when the framework was put in place. And we have to recognise that here today, because I think most people would say, looking at the facts of this case, it's clearly extreme violence, it's clearly intended to terrorise. And I completely accept and understand that, and that is my view. Therefore, we have to make sure that the law and the framework for responding is appropriate to the new threat that we face. And there we will make whatever changes are necessary in the law.
If the Southport speech wasn't damaging enough, Keir Starmer's latest move has left Labour Party supporters deeply confused. For years, Labour positioned itself as firmly opposed to Donald Trump. They condemned his policies, his divisive rhetoric, and his impact on global politics. Starmer himself was outspoken in criticizing Trump's leadership, but now he appears to be shifting course. In a recent statement, Starmer praised Trump's handling of certain international issues and even suggested the UK should work more closely with him. This is the same Trump Labour once labelled a threat to democracy. So what changed? That's the question many Labour supporters are now asking. Some MPs are furious, calling it a betrayal of the party's core values, while others remain cautious but clearly uneasy.
On the second point, Yes, of course, I was kept up to date with the facts as they were emerging. That is usual practice. But just like you, as a journalist, I had to observe the law of the land. It was not my personal decision to withhold this information any more than it was a journalist's personal decision not to print or write about it. That is the law of the land that is in place for the reasons I've set out to protect the integrity of the system, to ensure that the victims and their families get the justice that they deserve.
Grassroots Labour members aren't just confused, they're furious. Social media is flooded with comments from longtime supporters who feel the party is turning its back on its core values. If Keir Starmer believes he can win over Conservative voters by shifting his stance, he's taking a huge gamble. In trying to appeal to them, he risks alienating the very people who have supported Labour Party for decades. The party now finds itself at a crossroads, struggling with its identity. Is it still the progressive left-wing force that champions social justice? Or has it become a centrist machine willing to compromise for political convenience under Starmer's leadership? Right now, no one seems sure, and that uncertainty could prove politically costly for him. Starmer is at a pivotal moment. Can he recover, or has his current approach already set him on a losing path? His team may try to dismiss this as a one-off, just a difficult crowd or another routine bump in the political road. But that would be wishful thinking. This wasn't simple heckling. It was a loud, public rejection from the very people he needs most. And it isn't just one bad episode. It points to a broader pattern, a steady erosion of support that is becoming harder and harder to ignore.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery.
Keir Starmer aimed to unite the Labour Party and win over voters. But he now faces one of the toughest tests of his leadership. His recent speech, meant to inspire confidence, instead exposed deep divisions within the party and caused support to slip. Critics accuse him of betraying Brexit, and his shifting foreign policy positions are making trust harder to maintain. The boos in Southport weren't just about that speech, they were a clear warning. The big question now is whether Starmer can recover or if this marks the start of the end for Labour under his leadership. Will he change course or will the backlash keep growing? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more on political drama, major controversies, and stories the media often misses. Stay tuned, it's not over.